Great. So thank you very much. I think it's a very unique opportunity to have two executives from Supercell in Israel. For those, I'm assuming everybody has at least heard the name of Supercell, but for those in the games industry, you will know that Supercell is synonymous with a mythological kind of character in a very big story called mobile gaming. Supercell established, I think, in 2010. And is the iconic developer behind games like Heyday, Clash Royale, Brawl Stars, Clash of Clans, which is my personal favorite. And so I'm super happy here to have Aleksandar and Maya, both two general managers who are running, each of them running a studio with a game. Aleksandar's running Clash Royale, Maya's running Heyday. And I think it's a really unique opportunity for us in the local Israeli ecosystem to meet Supercell and to talk a little bit about how the company works inside. I think the fact that the Supercell team is here is very unique in the sense that I think there's a very different cultural mindset in the Finnish mobile games industry versus the Israeli games industry. And I'm sure and I know that we can learn from each other. So kind of that being said, let me just start with my questions. I made a list. Okay, so Supercell is known for creative independence, small teams, and kind of a very unique culture. Can you, each of you, just give me some of your own personal background and kind of what you did before Supercell, how you found yourself in Supercell, and what you're doing today?
This works?
Guys, we have one mic that's not working.
Yeah.
Audio team.
Yeah. Hi. That's working, right? All right. Good.
Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Maya. I actually started in the industry here. I started in Jelly Button Games. I think back in 2012. We're working on Pirate King, afterwards Board King. After the Playtika acquisition, I moved to work in Playtika, worked there in WSOP. And then after that, Product Madness in London, I was VP of New Games there, in charge of all the new games initiatives. And then one day, just got an email from Ilka asking.
That's a common thing that happens every day to everybody.
I was sure it's a fraud, to be honest. But it was like, hey, Maya, I heard about you from a panel that I did a few years before in Turkey. It would be great to meet. And we just had a conversation from 30 minutes to an hour and a half. At the end of that, he asked, okay, so what do I need to do to get you here? And I was like, just ask. But I think it was kind of like very for me, like growing in the industry, Supercell has always been this northern star, unreachable almost. Heyday has been a game that I've been I think playing since 2016. So when the opportunity kind of like came, it was super amazing. But I think most of it was trying to ask myself, what can I actually bring to the company? Can I give them anything that will help us level them up? And I think that was kind of like a lot of asking myself that. And then through the interviews, when I got there, it was really, really humbling to really work with, like, just sit and interview with people. Yeah, Aleksandar was interviewing me as well. And I was there and sitting like, wow, these are people who really, they love games. They're so passionate. They do this. Products are so unique, that games are so player first focused. And I think kind of like through that interview, I told myself, now I can never go back. So I have to make this successful, and it ended up being that. And I think kind of what they were looking for back then is somebody maybe a little bit more Israeli, but a bit Israeli who went through a bit of a process in London. So kind of like easy. But somebody who can kind of like really bring some new energy, but also with a lot of respect to the existing energy. So that balance. And then I joined as the first GM for Heyday. Yep.
Aleksandar, how about yourself?
Yeah.
Now we switch
I
back.
think. Does this work? No.
No,
Oh.
no.
This work? Yeah. So, yeah, hi. Just thank you, Ophir and Israel Mobile Summit for having us. Thank you, Elad, for hosting us. Aleksandar, or Sasha for short. Been actually started in the games industry with Flash games back in 2009 with a couple of friends from high school. Then was lucky enough to work at Nordeus at what was at that time a biggest sports game in free-to-play. Did another startup in Finland. That's how I moved to Finland actually in the first place. Ministry of Games. Managed to last for 5 years before we went down. Worked at Rovio for a stint. Worked at Huge at the same time as Elad. I don't think he remembers me, but
Now I do. What team were you on?
I was with Anton.
In Anton's team.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then moved to Supercell 4 years ago. Actually started on Clash Quest, which was one of our new games at that time. It was really interesting to Maya's story about culture. For me, it was really interesting coming quite a lot from the startup background and moving into new games at Supercell, how familiar that felt. There was this strong idea of being kind of like, you know, startup of your own in that environment. And then very quickly moved to Clash Royale, where I'm at right now.
Great, thanks. So both of you manage games that are over a decade old, if I'm not mistaken, right? And so, you know, there's this kind of sense sometimes amongst both industry and non-industry participants that some games have a bell curve, right? So you start, there's a hype, and they disappear. You guys are the proof that that's not right? So I think you guys call them internally forever games, right? So can you talk a little bit about your perception of kind of the bell curve or the lack of the bell curve in forever games, and how you actually make that happen inside Supercell?
Yeah, I think we can call it a roller coaster, right?
Roller coaster, okay.
Not a bell curve. I think there's something very interesting about forever games. It's not that focus about the end game. I think that's what we used to talk about in the past. So what is that end game? What does those end game players feel? So now it's like, how do we make sure that the game is constantly a place for the players to keep on visiting in, to always have something new, something familiar, something that they can kind of like have fun and interact with. But I think kind of like maybe the biggest secret is, and this is like, write this down. I'm kidding. It's just focusing about players. Players first. Players are the boss. We listen to them. We communicate with them. We try to give them what they want and what we think they want, but that's kind of like the main guiding principle. And I think I had a few conversations. Somebody asked me like, what are those features that you do that keep players in? And I'm like, it's not features. It's just gameplay and making sure that the game is fun and enjoyable. And also asking ourselves, how can a game that was enjoyable 14 years ago can still be enjoyable today? And then what needs to change to make it still like that?
Maya, can you give like an example of that? Like, just give us one tactical even example of, 14 years in, how do you still make the game fun?
That's a good question.
Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
I think, for example, okay, yeah, please, thank you.
There we go.
So actually, I think one very interesting thing that we discovered is a great way to make game fun is to remove the parts that are not fun.
Okay.
That works really well.
Can you give an example of something you removed?
Yes, I'm happy to. So on Royale specifically, we the thing we changed recently was, for example, the chest system. And actually, I remember there was a lot of pushback. Chests are very emblematic of Royale, right? It's like when you think of that main screen of Royale, it has 4 chests at the bottom. And actually, I remember those conversations where people are like, hey, but what if this has been there for 10 years? What if it's not fun anymore? What if it got stale? What if it got old? And then also like a bunch of things you add over 10 years starts being stale or old or does not connect anymore in the same way to the player as it used to. And just being bold to also remove those things and see that they don't serve you anymore. Sometimes it's a way to make something more fun.
Yeah, maybe I'll add, I think in the past, for example, play cadence, like the amount of time that you can spend in the app was very short. Like it was supposed to be this thing that you do when you're waiting for the bus or you're excusing yourself. And I think kind of like through the years, it actually became something opposite. It's a place that is always on. You can always be there. You can always play with it. And then I think today it's something in the balance. Like we're trying to figure out what is the best experience and kind of give you that experience, but if you want more, we try to give you that. So I think we try to understand why players are playing, what motivates them, and then that also changes through the years. Kind of like I think today, like we're like even here in the conversations before, our players, like, we're competing with everything. We're competing with television, we're competing with books, and we want to give them similar experience. So I think this is kind of like we're trying to see what was right in the past, but also what is right today, and how do we bridge between those. So yeah.
Great. Can you give us some insight regarding what the role of new users is 14 years in? Like, is user acquisition still a big part of the business model? And if so, how does that play into kind of the new funnel? Are these actually really new players, or are these players that played 7 years ago and are now coming back? Like, how do you look at that?
Well, that's a great question, Elad. I think one thing that's interesting is when you have these games that have over 1 billion installs, and in case of Clash, kind of at a tool, it's really hard to think about a completely new user. Even players that might have not played the game themselves probably encountered game in some shape and form previously. It's a part of the pop culture. So also after having games that are sold, especially in terms of Clash and Heyday, even tracking if the player is a completely new player or not is almost completely impossible. They might have lost multiple devices in the meantime, multiple accounts in the meantime. So it becomes a whole new ball game to just understand if that's actually reactivated or completely new user. But I think one thing that kind of, again, thinking about these forever games is like, if you have no new people coming into your ecosystem, into your garden, then eventually it will age out, it will die. And I think in that sense, the new user is still a thing and must be a thing, I think, in consideration.
Yeah. I think that's probably exactly that balance. Like, we focus on re-engaged players. I think like Sasha said, like, there's been so many players who have played our game in the past, but also our brand has so much recognition and so much weight to it. So even if we look at kind of like how UA practices today, we also have to take all these things into consideration.
Does that mean like a lot of retargeting budget versus like user acquisition budget? Is that kind of part of it, at least?
Yeah. Also kind of like the kind of ads that you can show your players. I think like we're really trying to make sure that they remember what Heyday is or what our games stand for, but also kind of like having that we are a brand and we have kind of like a level that we want to show our players. So I think that's also something that we're trying to also focus on. But I think, yes, it's always, what is that message that we present to players, and how do we kind of like focus on that? And I think even through the life cycle of the year, we try to balance between what campaigns are more forwarding for new players, what campaigns are more for existing players, but for engaged players. But I think at the end of the day, like, getting those new players who never heard of us or are uninformed of our games, that's the hardest actually to reach, and probably the most expensive to reach. So that's kind of like the icing at the top. But the biggest kind of like part of the pie of new players is actually organic re-engaged players. So yeah.
Interesting. So I want to switch gears a bit. Can we talk a little bit about Supercell, the company, and kind of, there's this story that I worked at Playtika for many years, and then at Huge, and we always looked at Supercell, and there was this story about the team size, right? Team size was always a discussion. When we had 300 people in the studio, Supercell had 40, and we're like, how the hell do they do that? Is that still the reality in Supercell today? And can you talk a little bit about team size and culture in that context?
I can.
Yes.
No problem. So I think when I actually joined, the previous model was around game leads, and the game leads were managing that small focused development team. A lot of the other support came from Central. And I think what happened in the recent years is we understood that we want everything under one umbrella. And this is kind of like why a GM came in, somebody who owns everything that is related to the game. But saying that, it's still a very, very small team. So Heyday, for example, is 53 people.
Wow.
Yeah, and Clash Royale is
65.
so very, very small teams. And I think it's not easy, but also I think if we're trying to keep that autonomous, like model of autonomy where we are empowering our team members to take decisions and to decide what to work on and how, that becomes significantly harder. Because like talking between 12, 20 people, that's manageable. But when 60 people talk to each other, that becomes almost impossible. And there's a lot of noise in the room. And just think about how hard it is to decide what to order for lunch when it's 60 people in the room and we all want to align on one dish that we're going to do today. So it becomes very hard. But then actually when you find or when you drive a decision that everybody agree on, I think it's usually one of the best decisions. So sometimes it's even worth it to go through that part. The other thing is, I think our and that's maybe something that we can do, is we have the best people, really. And I think hiring is hard and it takes time.
Is it do you guys operate with a global view on hiring, or is this just Finland?
So
I mean, you're an example of the opposite, but in general, I mean, there are obviously edge cases.
I think when I joined, it was more around, it was that global view, but you have to move to Finland.
Okay.
So that's not easy. Today we're a bit more open. We actually have a studio in London. So that's a
But
good
physical
start.
proximity is a must for your studio, your team.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think maybe.
Which I agree with personally, right?
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
think-
for the remote structure.
Maybe you can.
I think it's a part of independence thing. I guess there are teams that push a bit more for like a remote setup, not again like fully so, but like slightly more distributed. But I think our teams, both of our game units are co-location based, right? We do have, like, I guess you have London and Helsinki, we have Shanghai and Helsinki, but we believe in physical presence.
Great. Do you, both of you, like, I'm going to put you on the spot if I may. Like, do you know the name of every one of your team members?
Yes.
You too?
Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, I think the limit's 80, right? 80 or 85. That's kind of I think that's the number. That's super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. Great.
I think maybe kind of like another on the culture is, I don't know if you noticed, but our answers are similar but different, because every studio in Supercell is very different. So we decide how our studio is managed, how it's built, how it's located, how we communicate, what processes we lean towards, what planned chaos do we have, we're willing to kind of like leave. And that changes. We communicate a lot between each other to learn. But at the end of the day, Royale is very different than Heyday, for sure, in the culture and how we're structured and how we're working. And I think that's also a really good kind of sentiment of that culture of independence.
Great. Ophir, how long do we have? I just don't have any indicator. 5 more minutes. Okay, so I'm going to skip one question. And I want to talk a little bit about, the Israeli ecosystem versus the Finnish ecosystem. And Aleksandar, I don't know how well you know the Israeli ecosystem, but you've worked with some Israelis in Huge and in Finland, obviously. And what's the difference? And what do you feel like each ecosystem can bring to the other?
Yeah, so I can start by being in both ecosystems. I think there's something about our pace. We're super quick. We're quick to make a decision. We just go
When you
and
say we, you mean we, the
Israel.
Israelis, or we, the
Israeli,
Finns?
sorry.
We, the Finns.
I'm Israeli first. Yeah, sorry. But I think it's something in our culture, like we run really fast. But I think on the other side, we focus, on our side, like on the Israeli side, we focus on that. How do we maximize today? How do we get there as fast as possible? How do we get as far, as high, as quick? And when we're looking at more the Finnish culture, it's more around like, how do we get to that forever? How do we build something that is sustainable and strong, even if it means that today will be slower, even if it's on the expense of that short-term gain? How do we kind of like build for that long sustainable model? And I think the answer is in the middle. And I think somewhere, like, if we're willing to, if me as an Israeli work in the Finnish industry is willing to kind of like see that through both lenses, I think the dialogue between us both actually creates something that is very, very strong, kind of like building something between that extreme long term and that extreme short term.
Great. Aleksandar?
Funnily enough, I actually think my answer is very similar. Obviously, on very little what I saw, and being again super excited to be here. One thing but maybe just in slightly different words. One thing that for me is super inspiring, even today, listening to the talks and discussions, was this eagerness to seize the opportunity. and then like kind of basically seeing the change, seeing the new as an opportunity, which I think sometimes in Finland can be a bit different. Sometimes there is a bit of apprehension to change as something that might be negative or dangerous or like somehow threatening. And I think that's actually really inspiring. I think that's an amazing thing. But then at the same time, when I think about what's really cool about Finland, even from my own perspective, not comparing it to Israeli, but like just in general, I think was there is this focus on like mastery in work, right? It's like very often Finnish studios, Finnish developers will do something really well just because they're doing it. And I think that, for example,
Professionalism for the sake of professionalism.
yeah, like I think when you think about those like that moment to moment gameplay in Supercell games, like why that's great is I think that those people that develop it initially just really wanted to have that feel great, not because they necessarily saw that as a market advantage or understood that this is going to be the winning strategy. And I think that that's something really inspiring as well for me personally.
Interesting. I take that. I really like that answer. Thank you very much. One of the things when I think of the Israeli ecosystem is really that I think we did and we continue to do well relative to other ecosystems is this whole thing we call live operations, right? Monetization, live operations, CRM, depending on which company, each one calls it a little different, but categorized in live operations. Can you talk a little bit about live operations maybe in Royale and then maybe in Heyday? Like, what do you guys do? How do you guys operate in this context?
Yeah, so I think you kind of just to be very very frank about this, I think it's very much an ongoing journey for us, learning about that, mastering that. I think one consequence of having teams in the size of 10 to 15 people operate these games for a very long time was that we were very much doing these huge beats where we would spend 3 to 6 months doing a thing, and if that thing works out, it's amazing, but if it doesn't, it's just again like just waiting. And we are only now kind of having kind of trying to focus both on now and tomorrow, and today and tomorrow. I think we're only now maybe learning how to get better at this, to have a bit stronger cadence in player value we're trying to deliver.
That's amazing. 14 years in that you still are optimizing your business. I love that.
I think you're just learning about personalization as an aspect of delivering player value.
I think yesterday somebody told Sasha that Clash Royale was the first game he actually monetized on. So we're like really good monetization tactics. And I think the answer was it's not monetization tactics. The gameplay is just so good that you want to play it and you want to spend on it. But then I think if I look at the history and kind of like me growing up in Jelly, I think there's a lot to learn about how we need to monetize and how important it is to know how to monetize, even if you have a game that is pretty strong. So I think kind of like that's the way we see that balance. We still focus a lot on that gameplay. And then even I think the way I look at it is live ops is just that part of the game that is not constant in the game. So things start changing. And then monetization is a layer on top of that creates that demand or understands what the players want and how we can kind of give them more of that. So I think there's that balance, but there's definitely a lot to learn from how we look at player psychology here, how we look at kind of like how we approach things. There's this huge toolkit that we can just take from a lot of companies here and try to understand why it works and how it should work in our games.
Great. So I got a timeout. So I want to thank you very much for your time. It's a pleasure and a treat to have Supercell in Israel. And please come again. Toda rabba.
Thank you, Elad.